1985. He heard of this little concept called Applebee's back in the early 90s. I was there on day one working as a busboy and a host and a server eventually, and grew with the business and have been part of Applebee's for virtually all of my adult life.
Applebee's is almost entirely franchised, but just 30 operators control 1,450 locations across the US. For comparison, Dine Brand's other chain, IHOP, has 235 operators for its about 1,700 locations. Being almost entirely franchised makes its parent company, Dine Brands, an asset-light business.
Investors tend to like asset-light businesses. You're guaranteed a certain range of earnings, even if same-store sales move plus or minus in one direction. So that's why the asset-light model works for a public company. But in terms of Dine Brands, it just doesn't have a lot of attention because there aren't many franchised full-service businesses to compare it to.
Only 8% of Chili's US restaurants are franchised. This business model made it a lot easier for the chain to pull off a major comeback last year. Decisions that are made at the corporate level can be executed more quickly. System-wide changes at Applebee's requires buy-in from its franchisees.
If Dine Brands went to their franchisees and said, hey, we want you to, increase your head count by 10%, franchisees might, have something to say about that. And there's multiple stakeholders at the table.
As fast food has become increasingly expensive, both Chili's and Applebee's have focused on deals.
This Chili's 3 for Me is the best $10.99 you can eat.
$9.99. Applebee's really big meal deal.
But the difference in their success comes down to the level of investment made into the restaurants, not just the price of its food.
Chili's didn't just decide to put a burger for $10.99 on the menu and then see a 30% surge in sales, 20% surge in traffic. They spent $65 million in labor. They simplified the menu. They went viral because people we did the cheese pulls on TikTok. They had a great experience and they came back.
Insight into the financials of what Applebee's has done to improve its operations is more tricky. Applebee's does not break out the expenses of its individual franchisees.
And the franchisee model is great as far as financial engineering, but the downside to that is you don't have operational control. So a franchisee could pretty much do whatever they want as long as they pay their franchise fees.
They have contractual obligations to do that within their franchise agreements, but they don't always enforce them. So we saw this at Burger King for years. They didn't enforce the remodel contracts. And so now we have a system that is in dramatic need of a makeover.
The company is doing some things to take back some control. And improve operations. Dine Brands is offering financial incentives to early adopters of its remodeling program. It expects all of its Applebee's to be remodeled within the next 3 years. At the end of 2024, Dine Brands also took back the ownership of 47 franchised locations.
When it comes to renovations, I think the best thing we can do is demonstrate that a refreshed restaurant makes more money. And so that's why we're renovating 30 ourselves this year. So we can show to the franchisees, we spent this much money to renovate it, and here's the lift we got.
I don't think the brand should have to force the franchisee to do something. If they have to do that, then there's something wrong in that relationship. We do have 80 restaurants. Many of them are decades old, and it is time to reinvest in these restaurants.
Ultimately, Applebee's needs to prove its value to the consumer, not just through the cost of its food, but through consistently good experiences at its restaurants.
What's really important is the repeat business, so the same customers come back on a regularly scheduled basis. That's the primary thing they need to do. And then they also need to emphasize carryout, because what carryout does is you take an existing space and you're running more volume through it.
Another way Applebee's is looking to drive volume and grow its locations is by opening combination restaurants with IHOP. Dine says it will open 14 in the US this year and has dozens more in development. The first US location opened in Seguin, Texas in February 2025.
It was a $2 million a year in sales IHOP, and it's now running at a rate of $6 million a year, adding an Applebee's. And so that franchisee alone, based upon those results, committed to opening 8 more.
Years ago, Yum! Brands tried doing this with KFC and Taco Bell. Darden tried it with Olive Garden and Red Lobster. Neither worked. But Dine Brands says its model is fundamentally different because its brands are not competing with each other. IHOP is mainly serving a morning crowd, and Applebee's is mainly serving an evening crowd.
I don't think unit growth is all of a sudden going to ramp up to 5% because they're doing these combined units. But yeah, is there an opportunity in some markets where it makes sense? Absolutely.
Another way the company is incentivizing growth is by making it less expensive for franchisees to build new restaurants.
We've taken about $1 million out of the cost of building a new Applebee's, primarily in the kitchen, in the back of house. We found less expensive ways to do things than we were doing 30 years ago when many of the buildings were built.
Despite closing about 165 restaurants since 2019, Applebee's is still generating the same level of sales. Of course, much of that has to do with price increases of about 40% since the pandemic, which was in line with its competitors. However, investors are looking for system-wide growth, both in overall sales and the number of locations.
The restaurant industry is challenging. Traffic was softer than we would like it to be in 2024. That being said, I'm very excited about where the future holds us. I truly believe in the brand, and I truly believe that we will figure it out and be successful long term.